I'm tying this parachute Adams, although Dave Hughes calls it a Adams parachute, from Dave Hughes' book, American Fly Tying Manual. Using the ingredients in his book, I'm tying it on a number 14 hook, but it can be tied on other sizes. It's a dry fly hook, so fine wire using black thread. I am going to use the traditional calf tail for the wing post. It's a little bit harder to work with, but I kind of like the discipline of the harder traditional materials. So measure my post. I don't want it to be longer than the shank of the hook. There are some who tie this post a little bit longer, others who tie it shorter using the gape of the hook as the guide. So cinch that in, leaving room for thorax and head in front of it. Try to keep it on top of the shank. Tie it in tight. And then trim it at an angle. And that will help to create the taper for the body. And I'll just wrap down over the ends of that tail, calf tail, to where I'm going to tie in the tail for the fly. I am using moose for the tail, according to the recipe in Dave Hughes' book. And shank length. The calf tail does not stack well, so you just kind of have to live with a post that doesn't have a nice even top to it. The moose will stack nicely, so I can get a nice straight tail. Pick up on all those ends, try to trim that also kind of at an angle to help with the tapered body. I'm going to go ahead and tie in the body while my thread is back here at the bend of the hook. The recipe does call for muskrat for the body, and I do have some muskrat. It's very light colored though, so I am mixing the muskrat with some possum, gray possum. So I will get a gray body, maybe not quite as dark gray as is traditional for an Adams. Spin the dubbing onto my thread. If I just catch it in on the first wrap, then I can tighten that dubbing up to try to get a nice tapered body. And also try to keep it clean. This muskrat is nice, but when I add the possum to it, it tends to get a little bit buggy. So try to keep my noodle nice and slim. Wrap that body. Now when I get up to the front, wrap it tight again, pick up on the post, and then wrap some of that dubbing up in front for thorax. And that thorax is mostly going to get covered though with black thread. The head, I'm going to be finishing around the post and not around the body, or not around the head of the fly. Now that I've got that post mostly standing up, then I can wrap around it to create my post. And so I'm just going to wrap. And this does take quite a bit of practice to get to the place where you can wrap around that post cleanly. Bring my thread back down. Before I tie in the hackle, though, I'm going to go ahead and clean up around the eye. I've got quite a bit of calf hair that got grabbed, and that's one of the joys of working with the calf hair, calf tail, is that it does tend to have a variety of lengths in it because it's hard to stack. A little bit of cleanup works. Because this is an Adams, I am using some grizzly hackle and some brown hackle. This is a furnace that's got that black stripe down the middle, but the ends are brown and that'll be fine. I have pulled off the fibers on the end of that hackle feather and just tie that in by that stripped stem, and then I will stand it up. As I stand it up, the stripped stem will wrap up the post so that I don't have hackle fibers out of the where they don't belong. And then tie in my grizzly. Pick those up and then wrap around them. And it's easier said than done, but it can be done. And once I get that started, then it wraps easier. Then I can take my thread back down to the bottom of the stem and hang it off. Now I have found that wrapping these hackles on the post is a lot easier if I turn my fly so that it is face down in the vise. I like to wrap them together if I can, and hopefully I've wrapped them so that the fibers will point upwards. The picture in Dave Hughes' book has a very sparse parachute. When I get the wrapping done, then I come underneath of the thread so that now my thread is over the top of those hackle fibers, and then I'm going to try to wrap around the hackle without catching in too many of the fibers to catch in the hackle feathers. And then I can just reach in there with the tip of my scissors and snip them out. Then I will take my whip finisher and whip finish around the post, working underneath of the fibers and above the hook shank to catch those in without trapping hackle fibers. Trim out my thread. Then I'm going to put the fly back in the vise, and I can just tip it on its side a little bit, and you can see the parachute. And I'm going to clean up the body a little bit here. Take some head cement. I do use a diluted goop. Stick a needle in my jar, grab a drop of it, and I must drop it right there at the base of the post. And that'll soak into that knot and keep it from coming undone.